and welcome to this week's Sam Says. I'm Sam from the FPL Family and we're going to be talking about all things Game Week 21. This week I'm going to focus on two games in particular, the two clubs with a double game week in 24, so focusing on that Liverpool versus Sheffield United game and also on West Ham versus Bournemouth, and then have a look at some of the key players within those other games that we're not covering in full. So thinking about the players that did really well, the players that surprisingly blanked or missed games altogether, and what that should mean in terms of our FPL planning over the FA Cup break that we've got this coming weekend. Okay, let's start with the current league leaders Liverpool. They were at home to Sheffield United in the final game of Game Week 21. Now Liverpool started the season without the kind of defensive qualities that we would anticipate getting from them, from what we saw from them last season when they were defensively incredibly solid and incredibly consistent with their clean sheets. In the first 12 weeks of this particular season, they got 2 clean sheets, which is highly out of character. And when you're thinking about spending the level of money that we are on the likes of Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andrew Robertson, you wanted more from them. What we've seen in the last 5 game weeks is 5 clean sheets, much more like the kind of Liverpool clean sheets of the past that we would anticipate. And for us as FPL managers, it's putting us kind of back into that framework of thinking about maybe we should be on the Liverpool double up at the back, as opposed to the midfield, which we've all been talking so much about. Have a little think about that a bit later on when we talk about Liverpool going into the double game week in 24. Now these 5 clean sheets in 5 mean that what we now have is Liverpool keeping more clean sheets in those 5 games than some other clubs have kept in the entire season. 9 other clubs have kept less than 5 clean sheets so far this season, and included in that we have the likes of Manchester United, Spurs, Arsenal, Chelsea, Wolves, teams that you would anticipate getting good defensive returns out of. So the fact that the Liverpool players are getting those returns, albeit a little bit late, is taken until kind of the Christmas period to start seeing them from Liverpool, but we are now seeing them consistently, which for us as FPL owners is excellent. Game week 21 was also Andrew Robertson's first double-digit haul since game week 36 of the 2018-2019 season. So if you are thinking about the defensive double-up, maybe we are starting to see those Liverpool defenders coming into the kind of form that we would anticipate them getting, and we perhaps anticipated them having in the earlier part of the season. Maybe it's coming at the right time for us as FPL managers, given, as I've said before, that we have their first double game week coming up in game week 24. This game week saw Liverpool win the game 2-0. With goals from both Salah and Mane. So for us as FPL managers, it's a difficult one because actually both players putting themselves out there as good ownership options ahead of the double game week. Both of them doing equally well for me from the eye test watching the game, but actually maybe Salah was a bit more unlucky not to have scored more than he did. So what should we do about Liverpool in game week 24 then? Should we go for the slightly more economical way of bringing in the triple Liverpool players and have 1 in the middle and 2 from the back, which saves us a little bit of money, well, quite a lot of money actually when you think about the difference between owning Trent and Robbo versus owning Mane and Salah? Or should we pay the premium prices and have Mane and Salah and one of the defenders? That's the most expensive way into the Liverpool team ahead of game week 24. The other option, and perhaps the less talked about option, which I'm going to look at in a minute, is to go with 1 from the back, 1 in the middle, and then have Firmino up top. So I think in terms of owning double defence, we've already really spoken about how that can work for you in terms of the level of clean sheets that they've been keeping, 5 and 5, the fact that the defenders are that much cheaper than owning the midfielders. There's definitely potential there for owning 2 from the back. Now, whether you want to go with Robbo and Trent as kind of the more attacking options, Trent's already got 12 attacking returns so far this season, so he looks like a great back ahead of the double if you don't already own him. But there is also Van Dijk, who we kind of shouldn't leave out of our thinking, especially when it comes to headers from corners and that kind of thing. So if we focus then on Salah versus Mane and which of them, if we're going to choose, we should have, or whether indeed we should have both. Both of them scored in game week 21. Salah potentially unlucky not to have assisted Mane with Mane's goal. Obviously Mane with the shot saved by Henderson and then followed in with the rebound, which meant Salah didn't get the assist. Had Mane scored that original goal, Salah would have got the assist and therefore would have been better in terms of the points that he scored for his managers in this game week. Salah also made Henderson make 3 saves during that game, and he hit the post, so he was on really good form, potentially unlucky not to have a hat-trick at the end of that game, and the assist for the Mane goal had Mane scored earlier in that move. Mane was also unlucky not to have got a second just before, actually, after the half-time interval, when he missed Robbo's cross. Now, both of the two of them look great. They're both passing the eye test. The stats are both there to highlight the underlying abilities of the two players. So for me, that's the obvious way into owning the double or the treble up for Liverpool going into game week 24's double game week. They've also played Spurs next, where Spurs defensively have not been good at all, and therefore there is absolute potential for Salah and Mane to do bits in that game. So for me, moving forward, if you can plan to have two of them, they do look like a great pairing. Finally then, in terms of Liverpool, Firmino, and having Firmino as an option. Now Firmino is owned by just 8.9% of the game. Now when you're talking about the striker from the league leaders, it's surprising that he's owned by so few. And then when you look at him with inside the top 10k managers, he's only owned by 1.5%. Now that's for a few reasons. I think firstly, he has got fewer points so far this season than Robbo has, than Trent has, and than Van Dijk has, which is surprising when you think about how attacking and how important he is to that Liverpool lineup. He has one less attacking return this season than Trent does. He spends a lot of his time winning the ball, holding the ball and passing it to one of the other key players in the game, be that Salah or be that Mane. I think Firmino is often assisting the assist, and for us as FPL managers that's incredibly frustrating if he's going to take one of our three really important forward spots. But his underlying stats are really good. He's got more shots inside the box, for example, than Mane over the course of the season. So he is in all the right areas. He's doing all the right things, and he is an incredibly streaky player. We saw over Christmas how he can get great hauls in games, and that is the way that Firmino's game often plays out, particularly for us as FPL managers. He won't do anything for a while, although doing lots for Liverpool, just he doesn't do them in terms of FPL returns, and then we see a huge haul from him, which makes us kind of prick our ears and think, oh, actually maybe we should be thinking about him. Okay, we shouldn't forget the other team involved in this game, Sheffield United. Obviously lost the game 2-0, no attacking returns for them this week, but we did have Lord Lundstrom back in the Sheffield United team. He has taken a price drop since that game. He dropped on Thursday evening through to Friday. So we're starting to see some managers losing faith in him. But he did nearly score in those opening 5 minutes against Liverpool. And so I wonder whether actually the managers that have sold Lundstrom might just regret that, particularly with the injuries that we've seen to some of the other key players across the rest of the teams. I think Lord Lundstrom is potentially one that players might regret taking out if they've now got other things that they need to deal with. In terms of the rest of the Sheffield United team, not a lot to talk about this game week, but then they were playing the league leaders, they were playing the likely champions of the league, so we weren't necessarily expecting huge great returns from our Sheffield United players. But they play West Ham next. Now West Ham looked brilliant, and we'll talk about them next, versus Bournemouth, but Bournemouth were particularly poor in that game. So I think it will be a really good test for West Ham how they play against Sheffield United during this game week 22 that we've got coming up. In terms of the members area stats for this game, if you have a look at the shot maps for the two goalkeepers and the two goal areas during the course of the game, the absolute bombardment of shots on Henderson's goal was astronomical. I can't remember ever seeing that level of shots on one particular goal for a very long time, and so it's really interesting to see that Liverpool are that kind of attacking beast that we see that every week, and we see that they're always going forward, and the wing backs in particular do a fantastic job of driving the ball up the field. But that level of shots, goals they were really unlucky actually not to have scored more than those two goals. And that's also backed up when you look at the stats for the Liverpool front three. So when you take Salah, Mane and Firmino together, between them in this game they had 14 shots, 27 penalty area touches and 5 big chances. Interestingly, if you're a Mane owner, you'll have noticed that he didn't get any bonus points in that game. That's because he missed 2 big chances in that game, and as a result of those 2 big chances missed, he missed out on the bonus points. So it is really important for us as FPL managers that those big chances that the players are getting and that we want them to have, that they make sure that they are converted, because if they aren't, they lead to issues. Interestingly for Mane, those big chances that he squandered were created by Salah, and so that boosted him up the bonus point ranking for creating that big chance, and lowered Mane's because he missed it. Also, in terms of other stats from that game, again for Liverpool, 7 chances created from the wing-backs from Robertson and Trent. So both again highlighting their importance in terms of going into these games from attacking views. Both of them, of course, kept their clean sheets as well. So whilst Trent didn't get any attacking returns against Sheffield United in game week 21, he was really unlucky. And I think the eye test suggests that those attacking returns will come back over the next few game weeks. All right, let's move on and think about West Ham versus Bournemouth, the other team to have a double game week in game week 24, and the first match as David Moyes' second time as West Ham manager. Really interesting to see the change in West Ham. Now, we're going to talk about, during the course of this conversation, how much this is about West Ham and how much this game was actually about Bournemouth. But let's start with West Ham. So 2 goals from Mark Noble, a goal from Haller and a goal from Felipe Anderson. Assists from Snodgrass, Fredericks and Rice. So interesting that it was all spread across the West Ham attacking lineup as well, and that it wasn't just one player doing particularly well. Actually, the stats show that the whole of the West Ham attacking outfit did really well during the course of this game. We have to remember when we're going to go in to talk about West Ham during the double, they do have a particularly tough double game week. So they are playing Liverpool, as we've just mentioned, and they're also playing Leicester. So the 2 informed sides in the league. They are unlikely to ship a lot of goals, and therefore in terms of West Ham assets, we should be considering whether we want many of them in terms of the attacking returns that they might get. But also Liverpool and Leicester, as we've just seen from Liverpool when we looked at the stats, the amount of shots that they are taking on those goals would suggest that there's probably going to be a lack of clean sheets for West Ham in that double game week. So we might want to kind of just be aware of that when we're thinking about whether we want to bring in a West Ham player and how many West Ham players we might want for that double game week. Having said all of this, this was West Ham's biggest win in the Premier League for 10 years. It was also Bournemouth's, Bournemouth, they have, if you would just look over the last 10 game weeks and put everyone to a league position, Bournemouth would be rock bottom of the Premier League for the last 10 weeks. So how much is it about West Ham being so much better, bearing in mind it was pretty much the same personnel that played for Moyes as they were doing for Pellegrini the week before. Antonio did miss out with potentially a slight hamstring issue, so that's just something that we should be aware of if we are Antonio owners or if we are thinking about becoming Antonio owners for the double game week. We just need to be aware of it. Now, much like Ancelotti at Everton praised Dominic Calvert-Lewin and talked about how he could become the greatest or one of the greatest in both England and in Europe, we have seen Moyes heap praise on Mark Noble since his arrival at the club, talking about how important he is to West Ham, and we saw him absolutely stand up and be counted during this game. We should be aware, obviously, that the 2 goals that Mark Noble scored, on paper this looks fantastic. In reality, one of them was a penalty. Now we know that he's got that in his locker. The other goal that he scored was a hugely deflected shot, and so maybe a little bit lucky to have got the brace in that game week. But it does appear from everything that David Moyes has been saying that Mark Noble is going to become and is an integral part of that West Ham team, and therefore from a fantasy point of view he is a lot cheaper than a lot of the other options that we would be looking at in the midfield bracket. So maybe we should keep him on our radar as a player that has potential with the penalty dimension added to his game as well. Another FPL old favourite of mine, Lanzini, came on during that game and actually was unlucky that he didn't get something out of the game. He should have done better in terms of he had a headed opportunity which he kind of wasted a little bit. So he's another one. I think Fornells is the other one that you would have potentially been a bit disappointed in if you owned him. He was one that you would expect would have got attacking returns in this game, given that we had attacking returns from all of the other attacking West Ham players. But whilst he was the only one of the starting front 6 not to register any returns, he had more shots on target than anybody else, more shots than anybody else, and of his 4 attempts, 3 of them were inside the box. So he could have, in a different game, got some attacking returns. So I think if you're a Fornells owner, or if you're keeping an eye on Fornells and you're starting to think about, are there better options at West Ham for the double game week, Mark Noble looks great, but it was a bit of a lucky brace. Lanzini was unlucky. Felipe Anderson, we know from the past, has been a bit of a streaky player. Sometimes he's brilliant, sometimes he kind of drifts back into the background of games. So Fornells is definitely one that for me we should be keeping our eyes on. Don't necessarily write him out because he didn't get attacking returns in this one. Okay, on the other side of this coin then, Bournemouth. Now Bournemouth started the season incredibly well and we saw brilliance from Callum Wilson at the beginning of the season. But now we've had no attacking returns from him since September. Bournemouth have got kind of real problems. They've got so many difficult issues with injuries. They've lost so many players over the course of the season. They haven't really been able to get a consistent run in the team. But for me, Callum Wilson was completely anonymous in that game. He actually had less touches than Ramsdale did. Now, if his forward is having less touches than the goalkeeper, that is a massive issue. Callum Wilson kind of needs to be less isolated. And I think Bournemouth, due to the changes that they've had to make in their personnel as a result of all of the injuries that they've had, have seen Callum Wilson getting more and more isolated and therefore less and less likely to get attacking returns. If you still hold Callum Wilson, it's definitely time for me. It's definitely time that you should be looking to move him on. There are so many other striking options that are doing really well at this point, and those front three are so important in terms of our FPL teams, and there's so many options out there of players that you could choose that Callum Wilson isn't doing enough to warrant his starting place in your 11. One of the more highly owned Bournemouth assets is Rico. He got subbed at half time, having conceded 3 goals and got booked on -1 point. Incredibly frustrating if you played him, or even worse, if you benched him and he came off your bench for the likes of Vardy, who didn't play. After the game, Eddie Howe was talking about how actually he's got a slight niggle and wasn't really able to play, and that's why he came off early. So from an FPL point of view, that's something that we should be watchful of. If he isn't fully fit and therefore isn't able to play full matches and is having to be bought off as a result of that issue, his match fitness isn't quite there, that's something we should consider. Now, he is cheap, so potentially we could just leave him on our benches, but we are getting to that point of the season, and we've seen over Christmas how rotation can be heavy. Now, we hopefully are coming to the back end of that, given that we are about to enter FA Cup weekend, and we should, at the back end of this weekend, start to get back into a more regular FPL routine. So hopefully the rotation will be less. But with the likes of Rico, you do want them to be able to come off your bench with a point at least, if somebody doesn't play. And so to come off your bench with -1, incredibly frustrating for his FPL owners this week. Bournemouth have a trip to Watford next week in Game Week 22, which, off the back of this performance that we saw from them in Game Week 21, should see Watford continue with their new manager bounce. So if you have a Bournemouth asset, I think you should really think twice about whether you want to own them, or if they're a cheap option like Rico, about whether you want to play them in Game Week 22. Okay, a couple of members area stats from this game then. Interesting to, when you look at the heat maps, to notice where Snodgrass and Fornells are playing. Snodgrass often stayed very wide in this game, and it was Fornells that was coming inside towards the likes of Haller and Felipe Anderson, who were in the centre. So if we're looking for attacking returns, it does seem that Fornells was more likely, should they continue to play in this formation and with this strategy moving forward into Game Weeks 22 and 23 and beyond. Also interesting to note that the fullbacks created 4 chances in this game, one of those leading to Fredericks getting the assist for the Haller goal. So again, the West Ham fullbacks potentially might be a good option moving forward, but we should be aware, as I said earlier, Bournemouth were terrible and would be bottom of the form table if we were looking at the last 10 game weeks. So let's keep our eyes on West Ham, put them on the radar ahead of Game Week 24, remembering that the Game Week 24 fixtures that they have are very difficult, but there is potential there, and there does appear to be some new manager bounce under David Moyes. Okay, so that's the 2 games I wanted to talk about. Now let's think about the other kind of key turning points for Game Week 21. One of those major factors, which always seems to rear its head over Christmas period, is injuries. We saw some big injuries to key FPL players in Game Week 21. Heaton at Aston Villa, losing keeper. He's heavily owned in the game as a nice cheap rotating keeper option. Obviously, with him out, you could just look to go to the understudy at Aston Villa, who's now going to be in for the rest of the season, unless they sign somebody in the January transfer window. Or we could look to maybe one of the other less expensive goalkeeping options, the likes of Henderson at Sheffield United, who's been doing really well, or if you've got a little bit more money, maybe the likes of Gaeta at Crystal Palace, Fabianski, who's got a double in 24, although we've already spoken, it's a difficult one. Foster, who's showing some real potential now that we've got some new manager bounce from Watford. So that was a massive blow to Aston Villa, who also took another blow in that game, losing Wesley. What does this mean for us as Aston Villa attacking owners? Well, Wesley's not that highly owned in the game anyway, but who is Jack Grealish behind him. Now, losing all of these players, Heaton and Wesley, alongside the injury that we've already seen to John McGinn a few weeks back, is slightly concerning in terms of being Grealish owners. Let's see how he goes. What we do often see from Grealish is that he obviously is the talisman of their side, and he will stand up and be counted when he needs to be. And he's definitely going to need to be with all of the injuries that they have. Let's see who Aston Villa bring in to replace Wesley. There's lots of links kind of and rumours going on around who's going to play in that position, or whether they just use one of their squad players to do it. But whoever it is, if it's a squad player, they're going to be pretty much untried in the Premier League. So it'd be interesting to see. Might throw up a new Premier League FPL option for us, but those are really big injury concerns for Aston Villa going into game week 22, and of course for those two for the rest of the season. The other big injury news of game week 21 was of course that of Harry Kane. Harry Kane tearing his left hamstring during that game. Spurs yet to comment on the length of the injury, although a lot of the Spurs chat are talking about somewhere between 4 and 8 weeks. So let's see where we are. If you are a Spurs FPL owner, there are a few other options that you could go to. Could look towards Firmino ahead of the double game week in 24, Aubameyang, who did particularly well, and Arsenal, who looked excellent under Arteta in game week 21. So he could be an option for you. But there are so many cheaper options that are kind of all out there vying to free up a bit of money in your FPL budget that you could maybe use to bring in Salah and Firmino ahead of game week Salah and Mane, ahead of game week 24. So potentially you could look at players like Danny Ings, who continues to be excellent and has now returned in in 3 of his last 4 game weeks. The guy is on absolute fire and has the fixtures to kind of back it up now. He's got through a slightly tougher period of fixtures. Dominic Calvert-Lewin looks to be on good form at Everton. Again, the fixtures seem to be changing for the better there too. So he could be another option to replace him. Obviously, there's Jamie Vardy, Raul Jimenez, Marcus Rashford. So many decent striking options that if you're a Kane owner, all of those, with the exception of kind of moving up to Aguero potentially or Aubameyang, are going to save you a fair bit of money. If you got on Paul Pogba on the back of his couple of games that he played for Manchester United recently, it seemed like a good idea. It was always a bit of a risk, but now Manchester United have confirmed he'll be out for another 3 to 4 weeks. So if you brought in Pogba as kind of a bit of a risky pick, potentially now time to move him on already, maybe looking towards one of the other Manchester United assets, just replace him with Martial if you want to stay at Manchester United. Or there's quite a few other potential options in that midfield at the same price point as Pogba, but he's definitely one that you need to move on if you haven't done so already. The other big talking point of game week 21 was the number of captain blanks that we saw. Jamie Vardy obviously unexpectedly missing the game. We were all anticipating that he would be back after his baby daughter was born in game week 20, but he was missing through injury in 21. Meaning that there were a lot of armbands going out to vice captains. Dele Alli was a highly captain vice captain. He blanked. KDB blank. Aubameyang blank. Aguero didn't play. Kane blank. Rashford and Martial, they both blanked. So many. Sterling came on for a 1-point cameo. So difficult to have picked a captain in game week 21. It shows the importance of making sure that the vice captain is in a really good, strong position with somebody that you think is going to play, because there were a number of captains out there on Vardy who then didn't get on the pitch with their vice captain either, the likes of Vardy and Aguero. Okay, so we now have an FA Cup weekend to look forward to and some League Cup action and a little break from FPL to kind of think about where we are going and do some forward planning ahead to double game week 24 with only a couple more weeks to go until we get to that first double game week of the season. So thinking about using and making those transfer plans wisely. I'm Sam from FPL Family. Leave us a like before you go, and I will see you again ahead of game week 22.